Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Contractors Insurance Made Easy webinar. My name is Jacob Cole. I'm the marketing coordinator here at CID. Today, Teresa Cochran, our commercial underwriter, will be sharing her expertise and helping you write more contractors. She'll be going over the specific learning objectives in just a second, but before I pass it off to her, I wanted to quickly go over the logistics of this webinar. As you can tell, you're all muted, but there is a chat feature, so you can type your questions in at any time and we'll answer them throughout the webinar. Also, a short survey will pop up after the webinar so you can help us improve these for you. So we appreciate you taking the time to fill that out. And without further ado, I'll pass it off to Teresa.
Good morning, everyone. The objectives of today's webinar are to learn how to easily identify the types of contractors, recognize the full scope of coverages needed for contractors, understand how they are rated for, what affects the premium, and how to obtain a competitive quote. We will be discussing three types of contractors. The artisan contractors typically focus on their area of expertise, performing 1 to 3 trades with a low percentage of subcontractor costs. Every carrier has their own underwriting guidelines when it comes to the percentage of subcontractor costs allowed, but it's typically around 35 to 45%, so I went with a medium here of 40%. So let's say the artisan contractor has annual sales of 100,000 and is paying 39,000 to subcontractors. They would have a 39% in subcontractor costs, which means they can be considered under the artisan contractor program. Remodeling contractors are what I consider to be in between an artisan contractor and a general contractor. They still have low sub costs, but they are not specializing in a specific trade. They are performing several different trades. Your bathroom and kitchen remodelers typically fall under this remodeling contractors program. General contractors are usually performing very little of the work themselves. They're mainly hiring subcontractors to complete the jobs, with 40% or more in subcontractor costs. This slide gives a broad view of risks we are looking to write and ones we do not have an appetite for. We can write new construction and remodeling for commercial, industrial, and residential risks. Residential builders focusing on custom and individual homes, and the hiring of insured subcontractors. If your applicant is hiring subcontractors that are not insured, we're not interested in those accounts. We do not want our insured to be responsible for the work of a subcontractor. We need the subs to have their own coverage in force. This is something I will talk more about later on in this webinar. Some of the other risks we are not looking to insure are new tract home development, condo and townhome development, foundation construction or repair, earthquake reinforcement work, and roofing contractors. We are trying to avoid risks with higher exposure to construction defect losses. Therefore, these are not the types of risks we are looking for. And here is a short list, but certainly not an all-inclusive list, of different types of artisan contractor trades. And again, most artisan contractors are specializing in 1 to 3 of these types of trades. So let's say a contractor contacts you for a quote. What types of questions do you think you should be asking to not only pre-qualify them as a good account to go after, but also to understand what their business is? These are the questions that are running through my head when I'm looking over a new submission to see if it's something my carriers have an appetite for. What types of trades are they performing? Are they licensed? Each state has different licensing requirements, but in states like California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, You do need to be licensed for most trades, but maybe in your state, a plumber, electrician, or a landscaper doesn't need to be licensed. An easy way to find out is by going online and looking up your contractor's state licensing department. So if your applicant is supposed to be licensed, but they haven't obtained that license, then it would be best to pass on the account since most carriers will require them to be licensed. This is certainly not something we would be able to quote for you because our carriers do follow state licensing requirements. The next thing we would need to know is the size of their operation. Is the owner the only worker? How many owners are there? What are their annual sales and employee payroll? If they hire subcontractors, what is the annual sub costs? These questions are very important because this is how the carrier will rate for the risk, and some carriers will audit these accounts at the end of the policy term. So please help the client understand that they need to be as accurate as possible with the annual sales, employee payroll, and sub costs. And make sure to ask, are the subcontractors insured? Again, if the subs are not insured, then this is a risk we would pass on. If the subcontractors have their own insurance and the sub costs are 40% or more of your client's operation, then we would be looking to write them under the General Contractors Program. If your client tells you they have a general contractor's license, but they have less than 40% in sub costs, we are still going to rate them under that Artisan Contractors Program. My markets mainly rely on annual sales and sub costs to determine if we are going to be rating the risk under the Artisan Contractors Program or the General Contractors Program. A few other questions to ask. Are they performing new construction, remodeling, or maybe they're doing a little bit of both? Are these being performed for commercial and or residential clients? We have carriers for both new construction and remodeling, whether it be commercial or residential, but these answers will help determine which markets we can go to. Also knowing if they have had prior coverage. Are they a new venture, or have they been operating without coverage? This information will help determine if we have a market available. So the more information you're able to pull from your client, the better, because it will help you and I figure out if this is something we can find a market for, and it will make the quoting process go much faster. I put together a few examples of different types of contractors that we can go through together. The first one I have is a smaller risk with one owner, $80,000 in employee payroll, and no subcontractor costs. He is an HVAC worker installing heating and air conditioning units into new homes. He's had a lapse in coverage, so he's currently without insurance, and the general contractor that he will start working for is requiring him to get coverage. So this means that they have a contract agreement together. So as their agent, you would want to obtain a copy of this contract so you know exactly what coverages your client is in need of, in addition to any additional insured endorsements that may be required by the general contractor. And receiving a copy of this contract will help to avoid any last-minute quote revisions. So as you're looking through the insurance requirements in this contract, you see that they need $1 million per, $2 million aggregate general liability limits with primary non-contributory wording, a waiver of subrogation, and a completed operations endorsement in favor of the general contractor. These special wording endorsements are pretty standard nowadays, so most carriers will be able to offer them to your client. There may even be a contractor's bundle or an extension endorsement that includes these special wording endorsements, but it'll vary by carrier. And some carriers may not be able to offer the completed operations endorsement due to various reasons. So if you have questions on endorsement availability, always feel free to reach out to see if it's something that our markets can accommodate. And just a reminder, please type any questions you have in the chat room as we go along, and I'll answer them throughout the webinar. The second example I have are two owners with 100,000 in employee payroll, 75,000 in insured subcosts, and 400,000 in annual sales. They have a general contractor's license, which is great that they are licensed. However, like I mentioned before, with most carriers, the subcontractor costs must be 40% or more of your client's operation in order to be considered under the general contractors program. So due to their annual sales being 400,000 and subcosts at 75,000, we would not consider this risk under the general contractors program, even though they have a GC license. So this client let us know that they have no prior coverage, which is fine. I would just want to know why they are now looking for coverage. In this case, they're looking for coverage because the applicant finally has a steady number of jobs and has increased their clientele. So they have steady sales coming in. They are offering residential kitchen and bathroom remodeling services. And we made sure they listed out all the trades they are performing and noted that the plumbing work is being subcontracted out to an insured subcontractor. It's very important to list out all the trades that the contractors are performing, because that is really going to help when wholesalers and carriers are rating the risk for you. So using a contractor's application while collecting information from your client will help with gathering this information. And as you can see, they're performing several different trades and have low subcontractor costs, which would put them into the remodeling contractor category. They tell us that they're looking to obtain 1 million per 2 million aggregate general liability limits with a blanket waiver of subrogation and blanket additional insured endorsement in favor of their clients. So now let's switch over to general contractors. As I've mentioned, most carriers will require general contractors to subcontract at least 40% of the work being performed. And the questions you want to ask the client are very similar to the questions we went through earlier in the webinar for Artisan contractors. How many owners are there? What are their annual sales and subcontractor costs? Do they have employees? Is your client licensed? Are they involved in new construction, remodeling, commercial and/or residential work? Have they had prior coverage? Maybe they're shopping their renewal for better pricing, or are they a new venture? This information will help determine what carriers are available to them and if we have the right market to take them to. I want to dig a little deeper into this next question. Are they hiring licensed and insured subcontractors? Contractual risk transfer is an important way for contractors to protect themselves. A subcontractor agreement must be utilized with all subcontractors being hired to have the appropriate risk transfer provisions in place to protect themselves. So when your client is hiring subcontractors to do work for them, it would be best to advise them of the following. The subcontractor general liability limits must be equal to or greater than our insured's policy limits. The subcontractor must provide a certificate of insurance naming our insured as an additional insured. A hold harmless clause in favor of our insured should be worked into the agreement, as well as a safety clause to include job site safety and cleanup responsibilities. The projects and pricing should be clearly specified in the agreement. And lastly, both parties, our insured and the subcontractor, must sign this written agreement. And here's a general contractor's example where there are 3 owners, no employees, 1.5 million in insured subcontractor costs, with annual sales at 2.5 million. So we are at 60% in sub costs, so we can definitely consider them under the general contractors program. And they have a few years of prior coverage and are doing a mixture of new and remodeling residential work and remodeling commercial work. They are looking to get 1 million per, 2 million aggregate general liability limits with a blanket waiver of subrogation and blanket additional insured endorsement for their clients. They need 1 million in excess liability and would like business personal property coverage for supplies stored at their warehouse and inland marine coverage for a few large pieces of equipment and miscellaneous tools that they take with them to different job sites. It would be nice to have all of these coverages with one carrier, but you may end up presenting two or three quotes in order to cover all of these exposures, because the carrier that offers GL coverage may not be able to offer the excess coverage and so on. These are all coverages we can help you place. It just may be through a few different markets. The previous example was looking for property coverage, and it may not have been something you thought contractors would need, but most do have their own tools and equipment that they carry with them to different job sites. So here are some property coverages that you may want to offer your contractor clients. So there's contractors equipment, which provides coverage for machinery, equipment, tools, as well as mobile agricultural machinery and equipment. Some types of equipment include tractors, front-end loaders, bulldozers, tools, and other equipment that are mobile. We can go up to $250,000 per item and up to $1 million per schedule. We can offer up to $50,000 in miscellaneous tools and equipment and $250,000 in coverage for rented and borrowed equipment. There is also inland marine installation coverage that is important when your client is trying to cover machinery, equipment, and materials that are kept on site or at another location close to the job site that's fenced in during the course of installation, renovation, or repair. You may see this a lot during ground-up construction when there's a fenced-in lot and you can see bulldozers and stacks of building supplies. You would want to recommend installation coverage for your client in those situations. And as we come to a closing, keep in mind that a high percentage of construction claims do occur from subcontracted work performed. So please remember to advise your client about contractual risk transfer. There are several subcontractor agreement examples available online, which contain these items listed. So if you have any submissions you would like to send over, we would be looking for an Accord 125 and 126, a contractor supplemental application, and loss runs if they have them. If you don't have a contractor supplemental app available, we have one on our company website at CIDinsurance.com. If you already have a contractor supplemental completed, by all means send that over. I'll try to work off of whatever applications you already have completed. And if they need coverage for mobile tools and equipment, we would need an inland marine application or contractor's equipment application completed, which are also available on our company website. And please email all submissions to submissions@CIDinsurance.com.
All right, thank you, Teresa. If anyone has any questions that weren't answered during the webinar, now's the time to chat them in so we can answer them before we sign off. And then after we do sign off, I encourage you all to browse our website, cidinsurance.com. We have tons of tools for you in your office to use, marketing materials, proposal templates. Our applications are on there, online quoting options, and a ton of different recorded webinars. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to Teresa after the webinar. You see her contact info on the screen there. And be sure to stay on here so you can complete the survey and help us make these webinars better for you in the future. So I don't see any questions, so I guess that'll do it for today's webinar. You can always reach out to Teresa after, but we appreciate you all joining us and we look forward to doing business with you. Have a great day.